Where's the big change come in the last 12 months?
Well, where to begin? I think it's an example that you don't need to overcomplicate these things, but you do need to apply patience, because Arsenal backed Mikel Arteta squarely in bad times and in better, when there was intense scrutiny over his position in the early part of last season. They were absolutely unequivocal in their support for him. There was at no stage any wavering from anybody in the Arsenal hierarchy that he was going to be continuing as manager. They have been wholehearted in their vision, and that's really Edu as technical director in conjunction with Arteta as head coach and then manager. They've actually slimmed down their structure, whereas a lot of clubs beef it up, and Arsenal did previously. Less is more seems to be the approach they've taken, and make sure you've got a really tight unit of people from ownership level to executives to those on the grass, and that sort of togetherness permeates down to the squad. They've had to do a lot of surgery to that unit in terms of players leaving, players coming. Not everything has gone well, and it won't necessarily continue to, but they've got to a place now where everybody absolutely knows their roles. They believe in each other. They know where they're going. They're sticking to it. And around this largely young nucleus with a sprinkling of trusted and experienced players, they've struck a good chord. They've got on top of the contractual situation a lot better than they had done in previous years. Their recruitment has been really impressive on the whole. And one of the most important factors that we cannot understate, even though it's pretty obvious to everybody, is the connection with the fans. Arsenal simply didn't have a decent atmosphere at the Emirates Stadium after moving in 2006. There were the odd high point when big teams were beaten or there were stirring comebacks. But now every single game, the fans are creating a febrile atmosphere. That positivity extends to social media and conversation around the support base. There seems to be been a step change in both the team and those that back them. And it's put all of these factors together to put them in a much better position than they've been at any time in recent years.
You can see that the footballing credit will definitely go to Arteta and his coaching team, and certainly the development of young players under him. A lot of the stuff that you have talked about there, presumably the credit has to go to Edu.
Yeah, Edu as technical director, having sort of assumed full control after the departure of Raul Sanllehi, who was head of football, definitely has steered this ship forward and rightly earned an increasing amount of plaudits across the industry. Even those who I speak to now who were previously cynical at other clubs and in other roles within football are now sort of holding their hands up and saying, fair play, look at what
were they cynical about? What were they cynical about?
Well, Edu came to English football in this role. Of course, he'd been an invincible as a player with Arsenal, played elsewhere in Europe too. As a rookie, as a novice, when it came to being a sporting director, technical director, director of football in the European game. He had worked at, I think, Corinthians. He had worked for the Brazil national team, and those are roles that should not be sniffed at. However, he hadn't operated within the British European transfer markets or club system. And you're not coming into sort of any club. You're coming into one of the biggest clubs, but also at a time where they've gone through such incredible amounts of change. And there were a lot of claims. Is he over-reliant on certain agents and a small amount of relationships and going to do all his deals with them? Who really runs that relationship? Is it Edu as technical director or Mikel Arteta, who had endorsed his promotion from head coach to manager. There were some who even questioned at various points in recent years if Edu was going to be the next to go after the likes of Sanlehi, Hasfami, Sven Mislintat, Ivan Gazidis, all departed, and more. There are names that I forget, and he survived, and he's earned the trust of the ownership. And I've talked on this podcast and on other outlets before in how many of the successful ownerships have their person on the ground in the UK. In terms of Man City's model is quite unique because, Khaldoon Al-Mubarak is the go-between when it comes from Abu Dhabi to Manchester. He's not here all the time. And then you've got Ferran Soriano, Chiki Bagirstein, very clear delineation. You've got Mike Gordon on behalf of FSG with Liverpool. You had Marina Granovskaya on behalf of Roman Abramovich at Chelsea. And Arsenal didn't really have that. But in Edu, I feel that he really does have the trust of the Kroenke family, who we've always said and reported that they place their trust in their executives on the ground throughout their sports franchises, and they give them the authority to deliver. If they deliver, then they get the backing. If they don't, then they're out. They've also added Tim Lewis into this mix, who helped them with their takeover. He was a Clifford Chance lawyer. He has sort of increased in influence in more recent times, and to the extent where when you talk to other executives around football and even people at Arsenal, they say that he really is the man running the show. We reported in my Monday column last week that he has actually resigned from his position at Clifford Chance, and although he remains non-exec at Arsenal, he is spending more time than ever before on Arsenal. Vinay Venkatesham remains the chief executive, of course, but Tim Lewis is kind of the eyes and ears for the Kroenkes on the ground. And I think that Edu has benefited from that. And he has been given the freedom to implement his ideas, his visions. There's still a lot of work to do across academy and first team. But yes, he is responsible for a lot of the good work that's gone on there. And there's still a lot more to be done.
We talk about how together they are, this young squad and dynamics. One big new contract for one young player can then send all the other young players going, well, hang on a minute. I'll knock on the manager's door and I want a similar deal. And they do have some contracts to renegotiate, yes?
They do, and it's a bloody expensive process that they're going to embark upon, because they want to renew Bukayo Saka as a priority, and it has been for some months now. I think they would have liked to have done it over the summer during the transfer window. It didn't happen, and they'll hope that it does in the times ahead, obviously. I think his contract, obviously, it does have some time to run, and there's an option in there as well, which Arsenal have got in a lot of their contracts, including Gabriel Martinelli, which I think it was reported in the Evening Standard last week, has 2024 plus 2 years. So there's security there. But when you see players performing at the level of Gabriel Martinelli, it's not how long you've got to run and a club just sitting back and being complacent about it. You need to reward these players and recognize them, because they all build admirers from elsewhere who will pay them the money that they believe they deserve if you don't. And so you need to get round to dealing with situations like that. Similar, William Saliba, who is under contract till 2024. And Mikel Arteta has made the right noises about all of these situations in the last week, I think, saying that Arsenal are working on it. But that is going to be a potentially tricky negotiation, because Saliba, for however well he's doing and the love he's showing for Arsenal and vice versa, he spent 3 years out on loan after signing from St Etienne. Those were not easy 3 years. Arsenal didn't feel he was ready. Arteta didn't feel he was ready. And it looks like it's been managed really well now. But people don't forget these things quickly, and so you have to manage it in a delicate way. And it even extends lower down. We revealed in my Monday column this morning that Charlie Patino, this rising star of English football, 18-year-old, currently doing very well on loan at Blackpool, he's out of contract in 2023. Arsenal again have an option to extend by 2 years. However, there is an expiry for that option at a set date in the coming months. And if they don't get it done before then, and as I understand it, talks haven't started yet, then they'll have to renegotiate afresh with him as well. And there are a lot of clubs who are looking at him, although he's very happy at Arsenal. So that is a major task for Edu, who we mentioned there. There's even, I was going to say earlier that when you speak to people across the game, there's been interest in Edu from elsewhere. He's had opportunities from what I hear, but they are going to hope to keep this nucleus they've got together now at executive level and at player level. And it can be a hazardous process, as we've seen in the past, but it's a hell of a lot easier when you're winning. If Arsenal make it into next season's Champions League, then the revenues will take a massive uplift. Don't forget that the Kroenkes have been largely funding this process. In what form, in terms of loan or equity or whatever, I'm not an expert on, but it's a serious undertaking, and it's something that Liverpool have seen themselves, because I remember speaking to so many people at Arsenal a number of years ago, and the closest comparison they drew to how they would like to rebuild and the inspiration they could take was actually Liverpool. Who, like Arsenal, lost the Europa League final. And although they stuck by Jurgen Klopp and Arsenal changed from Unai Emery to Mikel Arteta, they were very determined on the path they were on, how they wanted to do it and where they wanted to go. And Arsenal appear to be getting towards there. They're still way behind what Liverpool have achieved in recent years. And Jurgen Klopp just signed a new contract. So I don't think he'll be thinking anything other than enthusiastically about this and determined to turn it around. I do find it really interesting that Michael Edwards, as technical sporting director, decided to leave. Maybe he felt it was the end of his cycle. Whether he also felt it was the end of Liverpool's, I don't know. And there was a very smooth transition to his assistant, Julian Ward. And it's going to be, it is a tough period for him now early in the job. And I'm intrigued to see how it goes. I think Arsenal may be looking to do a bit of a restructure themselves in terms of those executive roles, but using existing personnel as well in recruitment and so on, in academy too. So they are really interesting parallels, the two clubs to talk about, and contrasting fortunes at the moment, but we know how quickly things can change.